Bernard Zyscovich, architect, Zyscovich Architects. I'm the CEO. I was really interested in many things that had to do with trying to understand how society worked. And during those years in high school, I actually was reading a lot of existential books. I was interested in philosophy, very interested in trying to understand what made people work from a psychological point of view. So my interests were really very oriented toward maybe like a lot of teenagers, what really was there for me in the world, and where was I going to find a place? I never really thought it was going to be a religious theme, although culturally I'm very Jewish, but I'm not extremely religious. I have a tremendous amount of training. So what came through out of all that was this idea of a humanistic point of view that actually came directly out of the reading I was doing of Albert Camus and those types of uses. So eventually I ended up finding my way into the Fountainhead. My interest in that was there was a passion about changing something in society that really appealed to me, and I decided that maybe I should be an architect, truthfully not having any clue what an architect really was, except that I liked the idea that I could make things and build things and that I could have an impact, is what I was thinking, through the practice of architecture for the purpose of social change and what would now be called equity and those types of purpose-driven ideas. So I ended up deciding to do that kind of remarkably in an idea that I eventually found my way to Pratt after 2 years at Miami, 1 year at Miami-Dade, 1 year at University of Florida, realizing that everyone I was in class with was just amazingly more adept at the skills than I was. I have lots of stories of falling on my face during those 2 years, trying to understand how could I ever compete with the rest of the world, because they knew they were architects at a young age, because almost everyone else I've met was interested in drawing things and interested in designing things, and I wasn't really there. I was just interested in change. I applied to Pratt. They called me up to New York for an interview, and then a very funny thing happened. I had to put together a portfolio. So the portfolio for college was drawing things and writing things, like every portfolio requirement. And the dean of the school said, well, he said, I have to tell you, this may be one of the worst portfolios we've ever seen, because your drawing skills just aren't really very good. But we're very interested in the books that you've been reading and the things that you're thinking and the ideas that you're thinking about, and you don't need to worry about drawing. We'll teach you how to draw while you're here. What they told me was they were just fascinated by my interests and my point of view, and because everyone else comes in, they're basically getting in on their drawing skills, and they thought it would be interesting to have somebody come in based on some other set of skills. So that's how it all happened. And during the course of that study, I spent a year in Venice, and I learned an enormous amount of what I was looking for there. And during the 60s and the kind of the vitality of that age, Vietnam, civil rights, all those things, that's when I was in New York, and found that the process of being in Brooklyn, in what was then Bedford-Stuyvesant. It was a very, very ghettoized, low-income, quasi-dangerous neighborhood when I was in school. Now it's very upscale. It's very Tony. It's beautiful. It's now it's called Clinton Hill.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the thing is that at the time it really kind of gave me what I was looking for. I was looking for something real. I was looking for something gritty. I was looking for something that made me feel like I could really make a change. And I guess finding my way to New York during those years in that neighborhood with access to so many different important national and humanistic issues really kind of gave me what I was searching for. And it inspired me, and it made me feel like I could do this. I didn't have the skills, but I learned the skills. What I had was the sensibility. They didn't have to teach me that.
Right.
So I came in with a very strong sense of wanting to be passionate about this type of work, but I had no idea that I actually could find the talent and the skills in me to be able to be successful. So, architects, I think, come in different flavors. There's one flavor that an architectural practice is built around a style. So you can think Frank Gehry, you can think Zaha, you can think lots of different famous architects and even not so famous architects. Local Florida architects as well. Their belief system is based upon a particular stylistic approach. Frank Lloyd Wright, there's like on and on and on. The Florida school, the Sarasota school, the architects gravitate around that. I'm really interested in design, but I've never had a particularly keen interest in pursuing style as what drove me. I think there's other types of architects that are really more driven by context. They're trying to understand and react to the environment that they're placing the building in, as opposed to placing one of their stylistic objects in. So I kind of started there, but in Venice, what was startling to me was during those years, late 60s, early 70s of being in school, the architectural style was somewhat brutal. It was very, very kind of starkly concrete, heavy buildings. Think Lou Kahn, think Brody Davis. There's like other firms that were doing this kind of very regular but very pared down type of work. It's not what would be called minimal, which has a lightness. This was heavy. Everything was concrete, and it looked like it was really stuck into the ground. And then I went to Venice, and everything was a facade. It was like the opposite. So from my young mind, not having a lot of experience, what I experienced in Venice initially was frustration that why am I here? I mean, the city's really beautiful, but I feel like I'm in a museum, and what does it really have to offer me? And then one day I had this startling discovery that the city was comprised of these beautiful spaces called Campo Plaza. And the plazas were irregularly shaped, but they were totally surrounded by the facades of buildings that were just enormously beautiful and detailed. And I realized that every time I was speaking with someone, what was behind them was a stage set. And I realized that architecture and theater and stage set are very linked. And I think that the stage set is really, in a sense, this idea of developing character and developing what a person really is and exhibiting who that person is somehow made more noble by a beautiful background, by a beautiful stage set, or is made to perceive, like some of the great photographers of the Depression and the Recession, part of the face of the person in the background is the litter of an abandoned apartment, or, I mean, the amount of information that we take in is so loaded with character and emotion that the architecture, whether it's exterior or interior, is totally about enhancing that feeling that people have when they're interacting. So this interaction is totally influenced by the amazing view, by the simple color of the background. It's not, this is an office with a boardroom, and that's the thing that we're talking about. But the important thing is that when we make our buildings, every building, we're always very much thinking about what is it going to feel like, what is it going to be like to put in the theatrical space where we can make that interaction happen in a more interesting or a better or a more monumental, depending on what we're going for. If it's a synagogue or a church, it's about something more sacred. If it's a restaurant, it's about the conviviality. So we're very much aligned with the idea that we're focused on the purpose of what we're trying to achieve in terms of what the building is, its context, what the business plan of our client is, and kind of the emotional impact that we want to convey through it. And during the course of the practice, we started like anyone else doing buildings, but I've had the privilege of actually making entire parts of cities. And that idea of how things are connected, the authenticity, the stage set is totally embedded in this urban concept that we've been evolving over time, and a lot of the work we have starts with very large abandoned sites and how do we make a neighborhood out of it, like Midtown was ours. We created Midtown out of an abandoned rail yard. So Midtown is one of the great successes of the firm. We feel like there were a lot of people that were very doubtful that development could happen off the waterfront, that you could have a high-rise building, that you could create a sense of place in the middle of 2nd Avenue, in the middle of an abandoned rail yard, and now I think it's the catalyst for what has now become Wynwood, and the design district never would have happened without Midtown being there first.